So there's this idea, this person from Russia Today television, Tom Hartman, has this proposal to redefine corporations or prevent corporations from being recognized as persons or something to that effect. I don't know exactly the right way of stating it. I don't know if there is a right way of stating it, but it's a crazy idea. I've discussed this in terms of sovereignty. There's a work, actually a body of law, it's codified, and it's known as the Law of Nations. And one of the things that the Law of Nations describes is sovereignty. Because when people hear the word sovereignty, they think, well, you know, the United States is a sovereign nation, or state sovereignty, or whatever. And it turns out that all of these things that are thought of as sovereign, whether they're counties or municipalities or states or nations, are all corporations. And corporations have been recognized as persons for a long, long time. This is Blackstone's commentaries on the law of England, and if you go back to the last chapter of the first volume, there's a whole section in here describing corporations. After a corporation is so formed and named, it acquires many powers, rights, capacities, and incapacities, which we are next to consider. And then skipping down a paragraph to sue or be sued, implead or be impleaded, grant or receive by its corporate name, and do all the other acts as natural persons may, to purchase lands and hold them for the benefit of themselves and their successors, which two are consequential to the former, to have a common seal. Now this is kind of an interesting point here that you should remember. For a corporation, being an invisible body, cannot manifest its intention by any personal act or oral discourse. The reason I mention this is because people are using this particular case, Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission, as some sort of excuse or pretense, which they argue is somehow related to this corporate personhood idea. Ironically, Wikipedia notes that this correlation seems to have arisen by something that a person from the Cato Institute wrote. Isla Shapiro wrote that restrictions on advertising were based on the idea that, quote, corporations had so much money that their spending would create vast inequalities in speech that would undermine democracy, unquote. Well, I don't see anything in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, or at least a description of it. I haven't actually read the case, and I will read the case. But I don't see anything in the description of that case or what the gist of that case is that suggests that there's any sort of relation in there that was decided by the Supreme Court, which appertains to this idea of corporations and the degree of money that they have commensurate with an unincorporated person. Now, the Cato Institute goes on to say, quote, to make campaign spending equal or nearly so, the government would have to force some people or groups to spend less than they wished. and equality of speech is inherently contrary to protecting speech from government restraint, which is ultimately the heart of American conceptions of free speech, unquote. Well, I don't agree with that, but I don't think that it has anything to do with this case. And it really doesn't have anything to do with this idea of redefining corporations somehow so that they're not recognized as persons. In order to do that, I don't know how you would redefine counties and townships and universities and all of these other things that happen to be corporations. Because I think what one of the problems is that when people hear the term corporation, they think business. Oh, it's some crooked business that's robbing us of our money or something. You know, so how are you going to distinguish the two? Well, I described in this other V-blog that there's a distinction regarding a court's jurisdiction over an association commensurate with a corporation. And they do make distinctions as to whether a corporation is profitable or not. So now if you're a socialist, you would want a corporation such as your government corporation to be able to be profitable. So you're not going to be able to take these various public corporations, government corporations, and say that they can't be profitable. Stop and think about this for a minute. Why do states have amendments in their constitution that say that they have to have balanced budgets? Well, this really goes to the heart of this whole matter, because what the real problem is the 11th Amendment. This whole idea of state sovereignty, states' rights, and all this business goes to the 11th Amendment. Because what happened was that at the time that the United States was going to form a political union, because they already had a financial union. There was already a bank during the Confederacy. There was already a central bank. The situation is much the same as what we see with the European Union, except that unlike the European Union, the United States formed a political union, much of which had to do with commerce, but other aspects of which had to do with the rights of persons and with the structure of the government. And other things. Well, the states presumed that when the financial and political union was going to be completed, that the debts of the states would be assimilated into the federal economy somehow. And when it was announced in Hamilton's first Treasury report that this could not be done, this is what the states panicked over. This is what brought about the 11th Amendment, not something that if you read the decisions of Rehnquist, you know, he'll have you believe, well, the people were just so taken back by this idea that they would lose their sovereignty or whatever, you know, some kind of Civil War junk that he would come up with. The fact of the matter is that the 11th Amendment protects people from collecting debts from the states. That's why they have that's why states have balanced budgets, because nobody is going to cover their ass. They're not going to be able to default, okay? Now, some of the states, like New York State, for instance, you could sue the state yourself in the state court of claims. And the cases that you could bring are very much the same as the cases that you could bring in the New York State Supreme Court. But there are distinctions between the types of cases that you could bring in federal court and the types of cases that you could bring in state court. And one of those distinctions, a primary distinction, is 42 U.S.C. 1983, which is essentially the basic vehicle for bringing civil rights actions, and which now allows us to sue municipalities by the 1980 decision, the Owens v. Independence, Missouri. So what Thom Hartmann and these other people, Bernie Sanders, are proposing is really something that is entirely unworkable. And all that it's doing is that people that are into the Occupy Wall Street movement are all excited about this, and they think that some good is going to come out of it. The only thing I could see coming out of it is if there was some way that this ever could succeed, what it would do, it would prevent socialism. It would prevent states and municipalities and things from being profitable. They're not profitable now. They're not recognized as corporations now because of the 11th Amendment. Yet still they have these ideas would balance budgets. So the whole situation, which was never really adequately addressed throughout the history of the United States, is kind of a hodgepodge. But the system that we have now, the system that is in existence, that is recognized by the courts, is workable. There's no reason that it isn't workable. And using this particular case, Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission, really is a sort of fraud, because it doesn't have anything to do with this idea that Hartmann and these other people are putting forth. And the whole thing is a bad idea. You should just forget about it. And if this is what's preventing people from bringing Monell actions, which is the type of action that you bring against municipalities, because Thom Hartmann and these other guys have this thing about corporations being recognized as persons. You know, this has been going on for a long time. And the situation, the way it's set up now, works. And the whole thing that they're discussing would render so much of what I think most of the people in the Occupy Wall Street movement actually want to do. And I think the whole thing is just a bad idea, and you should forget about it.